Hey there, Dr. Christianson here. I want to take a deep dive with you on goiters and goitrogens. What are the things that cause goiters to form, and how do you work around them, and what do you do with all this stuff? So for starters, let's get clear on our terms. What's a goiter? Well, it's a diffuse even enlargement of the thyroid. So the gland itself enlarges. And this is a big thing in parts of the world, and it was a big thing historically. In what's called the goiter belt of the U.S., so mostly around the Great Lakes, we could see a third of the kids in school had goiters. And it happened because they were iodine deficient. At the time there was no iodine fortification of foods. And also there was less distribution of foods. So what you had was what grew, it was all just locally sourced, which is a good idea in a lot of ways, but not so much if your soils are deficient and there's no fortification. So areas where there's a lot of fresh water but no salt water, no seawater, you get iodine deficient. There's no iodine replenishment. And this would occur. And with the local diets, people would have these enlargements. And they would often be consuming way less than 50 micrograms of iodine per day. And this is still an issue globally. There's many parts of the world that are not near the oceans and don't really have any fortified foods with added iodine to where they can develop deficiencies. And globally, it's a huge problem for developing babies, developing their nervous systems, cognitive defects, so it's a big factor. Goiters, the problem about them is when you see them, so they can be unsightly, but they can hurt. They can be a large swelling in this vital area. They can also just make it difficult for doing all the things that this parts of your body helps you do, speaking, swallowing, or whatnot. And they can also hide and contain thyroid cancer. So the things that cause those, in the US, the most common cause is Hashimoto's thyroiditis by far. Also, Graves' disease, toxic nodular goiter can also be a cause of that, and that can cause this to emerge now. In the modern world, it's less the case of iodine deficiency as it is in some parts of the developing world. It's actually Hashimoto's. The paradox is that I mentioned how the rate of goiter plummeted with iodine fortification. That was good. That happened in the 20s. But the irony was that with iodine fortification, then we unmasked Hashimoto's. We didn't really have Hashimoto's before we had iodine fortification. And that's the whole iodine conundrum, is that too little is bad and too much is bad. And even changing the amounts to a reasonable amount, that change itself is also a stress on the system. They've shown that some countries, when they add in iodine fortification in appropriate ways, for many years they unmask large amounts of Graves' and Hashimoto's because of just the switch at a reasonable amount. So it's so dicey and so delicate. So that's about what a goiter is. So what's a goitrogen? We hear this term quite a bit. And a goitrogen is just anything in a category that can worsen the growth of goiters. And in terms of this being a comprehensive discussion, I just had to mention anti-goitrogens. So they do exist, more so in the sense of literature and research, but they're not things that are actually practical. So it's been argued that statins, that casein have anti-goitrogenic effects. Not useful things as far as like there being no overall benefit to that. But I just had to throw it in because that term is out there also. Some antioxidants like vitamin E and C, beta carotene, have also been shown to be anti-goitrogenic. They're actually good things to have in the diet and a little bit in multivitamins. So then what's a goitrogen? Well, they work by different ways. One way is that they can block iodine absorption, they can raise TSH levels, or they can increase thyroid autoimmunity. Those are the main three categories. And generally, goitrogens are worse in areas where there's selenium deficiency as well. So we find them from different sources. Goitrogens come from various chemicals, perchlorate being one of the largest ones of those, which is found in some soils. Some foods have them, which we'll talk more about. Then we've got thiocyanate, which is found in tobacco. And then there are medications that act goitrogenically also. One of the biggest ones is amiodarone, which is a high concentrate of iodine. And there's even a version of amiodarone called dronedarone, which is the same thing but no iodine. And amiodarone has so many side effects, including goitrogenic activity. Dronedarone does not. So it clearly is the iodine load that does that. Also, we've got lithium, which blocks the body's metabolism of thyroid hormones. Phenytoin, also called dilantin, carbamazepine, rifampin. These are all medications that are used that have been shown to have effects acting as goitrogens. So the big question is, can I eat broccoli? We'll come to that for sure. So in foods, what kind of goitrogens have we got? Well, we've got isoflavones, and we find these in primarily unfermented soy foods in the highest concentrations. So that's tofu, that's soy protein powder, that's texturized vegetable protein, that's soy milk. So how do these isoflavones work? Well, they probably work by worsening thyroid autoimmunity. So they work on that part of it. They're not as much affecting iodine absorption as they are thyroid autoimmunity. That's important for Hashimoto's. So what else do these things do? Well, here's the wrinkle. The data is strong that soy foods can do good things overall. They do cut the risk for mortality, for many cancers, for heart disease. So what do you do for action steps? Well, like any food, don't have soy or any food when you're taking your thyroid pills. Keep it separate. Definitely avoid all GMO soy, all the unfermented versions of soy that I mentioned just below or just before this. And do avoid all soy supplements that are isoflavone concentrates. Now, non-GMO fermented organic soy is an okay thing to have. That would include miso, wheat-free tamari, tempeh, and natto, all with those considerations. We're talking organic, non-GMO. And those are available. And the data is strong that those things actually add benefits to your health and your lifespan. If you haven't had natto before, it's pretty potent stuff. There are some sushi places that serve it, but it's a seriously fermented food, and it's an acquired taste. Kind of like a brewer's yeast, if you've had that before, but more intense and a different texture. Sticky, slimy, I've actually come to like it, but it's not for the faint at heart. If you want an adventure, if you're in some large, big sushi place, see if they've got some natto. They can make you a natto hand roll or something. So the next big category of food-based goitrogens are the isothiocyanates. And these are the ones in broccoli. We're getting to broccoli now. They're actually in all cruciferous vegetables and other vegetables in the genus Brassica. So a lot of stuff. Bok choy, one of my favorites, arugula, broccolini, cauliflower, collard greens, horseradish, kale, kohlrabi, mustard greens, radishes. We find this in so many foods, rutabagas as well, turnips, watercress. Now, how does this stuff work? Well, the isothiocyanates, they do work by slowing iodine absorption, and they are inactivated by cooking, so they're not really active with cooking. And besides, excuse me, besides the effects upon goitrogenic activities in iodine, what else do they do? The data is strong that these are super cancer fighters, that these cut the risks of most hormonally sensitive cancers you could think of. So breast, prostate, ovarian. They're also excellent things for overall detox in your body. So what do you do with this? Well, if you've got Hashimoto's, I wouldn't do more. If you've got Hashimoto's and you have goiters or enlargement of the thyroid, I wouldn't do more than a pound a day of these things raw. Cooked is harmless in any quantity. And apart from having an actual goiter, there's no big thing about having it raw either. So have them just fine cooked. A pound a day, that's a lot. I actually did see this be relevant for one person over the course of 20-year practice. A young man was enamored by a speaker who encouraged a raw food vegan diet. And he was, I think, about 19, and I remember myself at that age and how extreme I would get with everything, and I guess I'm still like that, but maybe not quite as much. But he did it hardcore, and he was living on 4 pounds of raw broccoli blended up, plus a few other veggies blended up. That was all he was doing for months. He did it to the nth degree. The poor boy got a goiter from it. He consumed no other food, so he was blatantly iodine deficient and consuming all of these raw goitrogens, all these raw isothiocyanates. And the solution was, don't do that. Eat a healthy diet, but have some more variety. Have a more range of foods and have some cooked veggies too. Cooking is good. Our ancestors, cooking was a big thing that allowed them to consume more calorically dense foods, grow bigger brains, make tools, take over the planet, make videos eventually. All these things we do today, cooking was part of that, and our genes are built around processing cooked foods. So cooking is fine, but even then, have salads, have some of these things, don't worry about them as a big picture. So other categories would be flavones and flavonoids, and these are also in some goitrogenic foods. These can actually work within the thyroid by inhibiting thyroid peroxidase. Now, there's not a lot of relevance of these because the foods that have them that are common foods, we eat cooked anyway, namely sweet potatoes. You don't have them raw. If you did, you could harm your thyroid and create more autoimmunity. The other foods that have them are either not common foods, or they're processed in ways to where they're not present, or the amounts are completely irrelevant. So pears, pine nuts, flax seeds, lima beans, they're things that we cook. Strawberries, spinach, they have these as well, but in amounts that are so small, it's not relevant. And then cassava has them, but in the way that it's processed, it's no longer there as well when it's just processed with lime and water. Then we have millet. Millet's a special snowflake here. The amounts are actually relevant even in cooked forms, and we can have larger quantities of millets. And the other thing is that it can vary tremendously from batch to batch. So I would avoid millet overall. If you've had millet, that's not a problem. I've cooked it in the past and eaten it before, and it's not my favorite food. It's not really much, not a substantial food, so not a hard thing to avoid. But yeah, avoid raw sweet potatoes, avoid unprocessed cassava, cook your lima beans, as you would anyway. Otherwise, not a factor for the flavones. So after all, broccoli's fine. As far as goiters, be aware of the structure of your thyroid. I think that this is really neglected in medicine. So many people have thyroid disease, they've never had an ultrasound, they've never done thyroid exams. So if you've got anything that looks the least bit unusual, definitely check it out. But even if you don't, get it checked out. You want to make sure that your thyroid's structurally healthy as well as functionally healthy. And if you're not sure about those symptoms, always check out that thyroid quiz to learn where you are currently. And otherwise, take wonderful care of your thyroid and all the rest of you. And we'll talk again really soon. Bye-bye.